So it looks like an open fight between former leaders and a party in disarray. But Elizabeth May is now not the only leader to speak up about what happened and what needs to happen now. The leader who preceded her, Jim Harris, Mr. Harris led the Green Party from 2003 to 2006 through 2 federal elections, also wants to speak up. So I spoke to him on Friday. And I began by asking him about the campaign and what went wrong.
Well, I have no doubt that Annamie Paul has experienced discrimination. And if this is your life experience, a roadblock can seem like racism. So after 3 months of having no contract, an Annamie Paul staffer told the Toronto Star that this was clearly racism and sexism. So here's the context, Evan. When I was leader of the party, I worked for 2.5 years, 100-hour weeks with no salary. And in my final year as leader, we put in place a $50,000 salary. This is the salary Elizabeth started with. And by the time she was elected in 2011, it was $70,000. And then once elected, she just drew her salary from Parliament. So Annamie Paul gets elected and she demands $250,000 a year compensation. She demands control over comms. She demands control over hiring and firing her staff. She demands control over the website. And she demands clauses in her contract that has been secret that allow her, through arbitration, to trump the party's constitution. Now, when the leadership bodies of the party did not immediately agree to these demands, the claims went out because it was racism and sexism.
Wait, so are you suggesting, sorry, Mr. Harris, I got to stop you. Are you suggesting that Annamie Paul is alleging that that there was racism and sexism against her, and you're saying that those aren't true and that she's using that as disingenuously as cover for her own failure to secure what you're saying, a higher salary, that it's disingenuous?
She, through surrogates, her former campaign manager in Toronto Centre from her by-election run, claimed that her not getting a contract within 3 months was racism and sexism. These are her staffers' words, not my words. So when she doesn't get her way, she calls racism. Now, racism, sexism, and violent metaphors like walking over shards of glass and spitting out bloods get headlines. But what we have to judge a leader by is their performance. And Annamie's performance as leader has resulted in the Green Party's worst performance in 20 years. We went down from 1.2 million votes to less than 400,000. When Annamie was elected leader, we had 3 MPs, and she has driven 2 of them out of the party. Jenica was driven out of the party by relentless attacks by an Annamie Paul staffer, and Paul Manley's defeat in the general election was due to Annamie's, again, staffer attacks and her poisoning in the party.
But Mr. Harris, you know what's, you're white male leader, and you're dismissing what Annamie Paul is saying as a black female Jewish leader of the party who broke the glass ceiling, and you're suggesting that she's using, I don't want to be crude about it, quote, the race card in a way to justify her performance. Maybe you're just blinded by the fact that you don't see how many barriers she experienced.
I am sure she experienced many barriers. I have no doubt about that. But
you're delegitimizing her and her team, who said she was treated differently because of the color of her skin and her gender, straight up.
Evan, you and every other journalist on Parliament Hill, every Politico knows that a staffer does not call for MPs to be defeated. This is like 101. And because her contract said she had the sole right to hire and fire staffers in her leader's office, this staffer for weeks was allowed to call for the defeat of our MP.
But she
this
says,
is untenable.
This is Noah Zatzman, one of her advisors, that, and this was, just so our viewers understand, over what Jenica Atwin had talked about the Palestinian-Israeli situation and the use of the word apartheid in that, and Noah Zatzman had called that anti-Semitic, and I appreciate that. But Annamie Paul says she couldn't get the right funding, she couldn't run a proper campaign, that she was undermined and essentially set up to fail. You don't believe, you're saying that you don't think she's telling the truth at all, that that story's wrong.
Annamie had $170,000 in Toronto Centre bank account going into the election. Her campaign demanded hundreds of thousands of dollars of air support in the form of national advertising in the Toronto market to support her win. She had hundreds of volunteers coming into her riding, canvassing with her. And despite all that, her vote collapsed from 33% in the by-election to less than 10%. It was 8.6%. Clearly, her riding, which is very ethnically diverse, did not resonate with her leadership.
Sir, I think a lot of people, Jim Harris, are looking at this and saying, this is it. The party, this is it raw. You're the former leader. You're essentially alleging that she's totally unethical by alleging, attacks and inter-party turmoil, avoiding responsibility, talking about racism when you say none exist, lying about attacks. Have you aired any of these grievances to Annamie Paul or to the party? And again, I got to ask you candidly, were you actively working to get rid of Annamie Paul?
So in terms of airing these things, I have not publicly talked about this at all. This is Evan, and this is the first program I have ever spoken to, first journalist I have spoken to about these issues. Because it's very important not to air your dirty laundry in public in politics. Everybody knows that. But so I said nothing about this to anybody publicly before the election. We wanted to have the best election we could have.
But listening to you, a lot of people say this is why, you embody the reason why women of color do not want to get into politics. They're undermined. You just said the people are working against them. They're criticized. They're held to a different standard. And it's brutal. Annamie Paul herself said the glass ceiling crashed on my face. I was spitting out blood. And they're listening to someone like you and they're saying, here it is. This is it in perfect illustration of why we have so few women of color in politics. Right here, the undermining and attacking of a leader.
No, it's holding people accountable for performance. The worst election in 20 years the leader has to be held to account.
But if her point is she was set up to fail by the inner circle, including you.
No, I don't think she was set up to fail. She, and in fact, the Green Party, Elizabeth May preceded her, fantastic leader. The current president on council is the first Aboriginal Indigenous president of the federal council. We have fantastic, Lisa Gunderson, the VP English, we have fantastic people on council and in leadership roles in the party. It's not about women or diversity. It's about accountability and performance.